Alright everyone, today's video is going to be a repository of all the different stats and skills in Kingdom Come Deliverance and how best to level each and every one of them. I could have broken this down into a bunch of different segments, 10 minutes each, and kind of maximized the amount of content that I was producing, but I would have had to repeat myself and it wouldn't have been as valuable. So I opted to go for everything in one single video. So that being considered, please drop a like if you find it helpful. First up is main level, and this is actually a product of all of your different skills. So based on what your strength, agility, vitality, etc., are, your main level will increase. There's no way that I know of to directly raise just your main level, but as you're completing activities in any other area of the game, this will increase. So keep that in mind. Main level is an isolated factor in this. The first place to go is Captain Bernard right here, and you're going to see him in a lot of my different videos and a lot of other people's videos and guides as well, because he is such an important character in the game. So Captain Bernard is going to be your training source for pretty much every single combat stat. If we go over here to our character sheet, our player sheet, then I'll be able to show you can train strength here, agility, vitality. You can train, if you go over to combat, you can train defense, warfare, axe, mace, sword, and unarmed. You can train all of these different things, and I'll explain how right now. To train strength in particular, you will need to have a strength-based weapon equipped. So if I go over to my inventory, you can see that I have this heavy warhammer. If you hit the item info button, you can then see that the minimum strength required is 10. That means that this is a strength-based weapon. If I were to equip this and then enter into combat and training combat against Sir Bernard, I would be able to train the strength stat in particular. You can select training combat with a real weapon, which would then use your currently equipped strength-based weapon, and you would have to enter combat. You would get injured, you'd have to go heal, but that's one way to do it. And the other method is to select training combat with a practice weapon, and then specifically select the mace, since the mace is a strength-based item. So select this, and you can jump in to training that will then raise your strength level in particular. There are also a variety of other ways to train strength. You can use any other weapon in combat. There's a variety of other activities as well to varying degrees of efficiency where you will passively gain strength experience, but this is the fastest way that I know of to gain strength XP in particular when you are trying to target that skill. Next up is agility, and yet again, this is Captain Bernard. You simply need to equip an agility-based weapon. So if I go to my weapons here, you can see that I have a Robber Baron sword. If I select info, the minimum agility required is 9. Therefore, this is an agility-based short sword, which you then equip and then train against him. Like I said before, during the mace section of this video, you can go for real weapon combat. If we are to talk to him right here, we can train with a real weapon. That will select the weapon that you have equipped. Or you could go for training combat with a practice weapon and select the short sword, since that is agility based. Either way, you will be training warfare, you'll be training your main level, and you'll be training, in particular, agility. Since so many of these skills are trained at Captain Bernard, since they are combat based, I'm just going to knock them out right now. The best way to train defense is to equip a shield, enter into combat with him in a training role, and then simply wait for him to do combos and block them. That's the best way to train your defense stat. You can also train it by fighting bandits and various other mercenaries, but Captain Bernard is the most reliable and quickest way. So defense, equip a shield, any weapon at all with a shield, and simply block attacks. Warfare, simply fight in any capacity, just queue against him with any weapon equipped for any amount of time, and you'll be training your warfare skill. With an axe, pretty self-explanatory there, simply equip an axe and then fight against him. With a mace, we already covered that, and with a sword, same deal, equip one, fight against him. You will be then training your sword skill. Also, unarmed, he has an option to train unarmed if you scroll all the way down to the bottom. So that covers all of the combat stats. The lesson here is that Captain Bernard is singularly probably the most important NPC in the entire game. So if you want to train anything that has to do with combat and also some other augmented skills besides that, which will also get some residual experience gain, then come to him and practice against him for hours on end, and you will become insanely strong super fast. Next up are some more interesting stats that hopefully will provide some valuable information since combat is so straightforward. You have vitality. Now, vitality is going to sound a little bit dumb, but basically the way that you train this, especially in early levels, is you simply jump up and down. It may sound kind of weird and it might not make a lot of sense, but you simply jump up and down in a stationary spot and you will be training your vitality stat. Especially early on in the game, you'll train it very quickly. Another way that you can do this, if you don't want to do that, is you can run over to any area where you vault over a fence or a low rock wall or something like that, and you simply climb over repeatedly back and forth. This will train your vitality stat, and it will do so very quickly, especially early on. Now, there are other ways to train the vitality stat, but all of them, kind of give other experience as well. And this is the only way that I know of to target specifically just vitality and then train that. You can train it while you're in combat. You can train it, in various other ways, some ways that I'm probably not even aware of. But jumping up and down and vaulting over things repeatedly is one of the fastest ways to train up your vitality to get some really interesting perks, like, for instance, Revenant. Your health will regenerate gradually. I think that that's probably one of the most valuable things in the game. I have not yet unlocked it, but I am angling for that pretty hardcore. There's some really interesting, perks and traits in the vitality tree, so training this up early on can be really helpful. Next up is speech, and this is another skill that will gradually train kind of no matter what you're doing. Over the course of your whole gameplay experience, it will raise to a significantly higher level than what it even is right now on my screen. But the way to raise this is by selecting every possible dialogue option within the game every time you talk to someone. There are places where you can haggle. There are places where you'll have multiple more dialogue options than anywhere else. A great place is something like a tavern. You can come here and play dice, and you can haggle with this guy, and then there'll be usually another patron or citizen over at a different table. You can continuously haggle with them and play dice for small amounts of money over and over, which will raise your speech skill. You can likewise go to any vendor, and there are a lot of vendors in each major town or city. And you can simply go in and buy something and haggle with them and just talk to every NPC that you see and select every dialogue option. There's no targeted specific way to raise this other than simply running around a town and talking to everyone, and it's not going to be that quick. This isn't a skill that you can level insanely fast, but it should get the job done if you're dedicated. Next up, we have charisma, visibility, conspicuousness, noise, and speed, and these are all a product of other skills and the items that you're wearing. So charisma is impacted by what items you have on and how dirty they are, whether or not there's blood on your weapon, etc., etc. So if we were to go over to my inventory, we can go to my armor, we can see that I have a decorated piece of armor that would raise my charisma. I can unequip various other items and raise it yet again. Individual things, whether they're dirty or clean, is going to impact that. Whether they're fancy or common folk would wear them, peasants would have them on. That's all going to impact charisma. So your stat down there is a product of all the items that you're wearing, and you can't actually raise that specifically without getting better gear. You can't go and train your charisma stat. One thing you can do to temporarily raise your charisma by 2 levels is to go to a bathhouse located in any major city and signified by the water pouring into a bucket. Go to the proprietor of that establishment, and there will be certain services available to you. My horse is in the way, I can't really talk to her. Here we go. There's certain services that will give you a boost to your charisma, as seen on screen right here. Now, I won't demonstrate that, but after it's done... Just kidding. I wonder if I'm going to get demonetized for that, though. Rip. After that's done, you will see that you have a 2 charisma boost, and that's demonstrated by the lion that's down to the left of your health bar. This is temporary, but you can do this anytime you need to go talk to vendors or have a boost to charisma, and that's the only way that I know of, other than clothing, to do that. Next, you have visibility. Again, like charisma, this is a product of your clothing. All you need to do is scroll through all of the different items that you're wearing and see if they affect visibility. As I scroll up here, I can find different, pieces of gear that will affect visibility by varying degrees or amounts. And it's just a matter of finding which ones have the least visibility and equipping them, or the most visibility, depending on what you're trying to do. Next is conspicuousness. Again, same deal. Go through your items and find the things that are more or less conspicuous and then equip them. Conspicuousness is something that I don't really find to be all that troubling in the game, regardless of how conspicuous you are, and there are certain items that raise it by a huge amount or lower it by a huge amount. Regardless of whatever that number is, guards will still search you sometimes if you have low reputation, and probably not ever search you if you have high reputation. So just, use that at your discretion. I don't really know of a useful time to raise or lower that. Unless you're trying to train stealth or pickpocketing or whatever, then you want to be less conspicuous, but even then it doesn't really seem to have that big of an impact. Next are noise and speed. Same deal here. I'll keep it brief. Noise is a product of how much armor you're wearing, whether or not it's plate mail or leather armor, etc. I'm a super noisy character right now because I'm wearing mostly plate mail. And then speed is a product of your strength level versus how much gear you're carrying. If you have a very high strength level, which I do at 14, and you're not carrying all that much gear, then your speed is going to be a lot higher. Likewise, if you have a very low strength level and you are carrying a ton of different stuff or over encumbered, etc., then your your speed level will be much lower. So speed is a product of strength and overburdened or carry weight capacity. Noise, conspicuousness, visibility, and charisma are all products of clothing that you're wearing. Moving on, we have the combat skills, which we've covered most of already. The only one we have not talked about is the bow, and there is a very good way to train the bow skill. The bow training method is to come here to to this place right here, and there's a guy named Vatsek, who you then talk to, and you compete in an archery competition. Side note, this is also a really good way, if you're good at using the bow and arrow, to earn gold, to earn money. So if you enter into this, you will have your arrows paid for. You will be able to compete for varying amounts against other archers, and it will be the fastest way to earn experience. You can bet varying amounts. I would recommend going with 10 if you're early on in the bow tree and you're not very good yet, and then 50 if you're trying to earn money and train your bow skill later on. All you have to do is shoot the arrows into the logs. All the arrows are paid for, and it's not super difficult to do, but it's also not super easy. You will be gaining experience. They're moving targets, and it's something that can very quickly raise your bow skill, much better than many other areas in the game, without any cost. In fact, you'll be earning money while you do it, and it is a really, really efficient method. You can probably get over level 10 in a matter of 1 to 2 hours if you are good, as well as earn a couple thousand groschen or gold during that duration. Even if you get second place, you'll get your money back and you won't lose anything. You don't necessarily even have to win, but you can compete in this contest over and over, and it's a really, really great method. You can also get some bow experience from the huntsman in Rate, or any other huntsman for that matter, signified by the horn icon on the map. Simply talk to him if you are in good standing, and the same with all other trainers. You'll get some experience for the bow in various intervals. Now we move on to the more interesting part, which is the actual skills. We've covered main stats and combat. Now it's time for skills. You have Alchemy. Alchemy is a little bit difficult to train when compared to some other stats because you do need to know how to read in order to most efficiently go through and raise the level. The way that you learn to read, I've actually gotten a couple of questions about this, is if you go over to the quest log, there is a specific quest called Mightier Than the Sword, and you need to talk to a scribe in Uzits. I'm definitely butchering that pronunciation. But if we go to the map here, I will show you where it is. If we go to the map, you can see that over here in Uzits, up top in the top right hand section of the map, if we zoom in here, there will be a scribe located right here. You need to go to him, you'll train with him, you'll learn a little bit of Latin, you'll read a book a couple of times, decipher a message, and then you will basically learn how to read, and then you need to buy books from vendors in order to raise that again. But I'll talk about that when I talk about the actual reading skill, since it is its own skill tree. But you need to know how to read in order to have the most efficient method of training alchemy. Then you need to go to an alchemy bench, start making potions and brewing, and then use the recipe book to make as many potions as you possibly can. There are certain perks that will increase the amount of potion yield that you get from using the recipe book, but that's the most efficient method. You can also brew them yourself. There's a timer, and you can put different ingredients in different slots, but that's a lot more complicated and takes a lot more time. The next way to train alchemy, but this is a one-off and does not give repeatable experience, and it does cost coin, is to get training from herbalists. There's one in most major cities. There are some on farms and homesteads out in the countryside, but you select training from any herbalist and you will be able to train in the alchemy skill. Next is drinking, and this one is really straightforward. Simply go to a tavern and drink. Drink any sort of alcoholic substance, whether it be beer or wine, and you will raise the drinking skill. As you can see, mine is 1, my alchemy skill as well on this character in particular. But drinking, I really haven't prioritized either of these just yet, but on another character, they are quite high, and drinking, you can really get this up, fairly quickly. just by drinking a lot of alcohol and getting severely drunk. But that's probably not that advised. It's really not that useful of a tree. There are some cool perks, but just go to any tavern and drink, or, you know, buy beer and just consume it over time. Every time you're completing an activity, just take a beer before you do, and you'll raise it that way. A lot of potions are also alcoholic, so if you are brewing a lot of combat potions with the alchemy skill and then consuming them routinely, you'll also raise your drinking skill. Next, we have Herbalism, and this is a really fast one to train. I highly recommend heading out to the field that is north of Rattay. It's kind of around this river bend here. Heading out to somewhere in this field, this general vicinity, and then picking herbs or, you know, various plants. There's marigolds, there's dandelions, and as you level up the Herbalism skill, you'll notice that when you clear a patch, you can pick one thing and then clear a large radius around yourself, and there are a lot of plants present here. I'm sure that there are other patches in the game where this is just as efficient, but with this method and in this patch in particular, you can be over level 10 in probably under 1 hour. I don't know if you're supposed to be able to train that fast, but you really can. Herbalism has some really good perks. Your charisma can go up, and I should have actually mentioned this back when I was talking about the charisma stat, but there are various perks in the Herbalism tree to increase your charisma if you are carrying fragrant herbs. So that's another method of that. Herbalism has some really great passive traits. And you simply just pick herbs over and over in this field. You'll clear cut the entire thing, and you'll be level 10 within a matter of minutes, honestly. If you can find concentrated dandelions in particular. When you pick a dandelion, there are usually a lot more in that radius, and all of those gathered will give experience. The trait I was talking about is Flower Power, +2 to Charisma if you're carrying fragrant herbs. And then there's also something called Leg Day. Herb picking activity will add experience to your Strength stat too. And as I previously mentioned with Strength, there's a lot of residual ways to train that. A lot of other, you know, different activities that add to the Strength skill. This is one of them. So all of these skills are tied into each other, and Herbalism is one of my favorites in the game, at least, for gathering money, because you can pick so many herbs at once, for increasing Charisma, and for also increasing Strength. Next up is Horsemanship, which is really straightforward. All you have to do is get on your horse and then ride around. I like to just get on and ride around in basically circles at a full gallop. Another thing that you can do is get on a road, and if you were to just simply press B once, then your horse will canter. So if you can find a road that leads for a very long time, you can actually tape down the B button, or in other ways, you know, trap the B button in the down or whatever corresponding key on a different platform into the down position, and then you will then canter down the road automatically and level the horsemanship skill. So this is just something you have to do for a long period of time. There's no easy cheese method that I know of. Simply ride around on your horse for an extended period of time, maybe hold down the button or put something on top of it, and then follow a road for as long as you can. Come back in a few minutes, you know, go get a snack, switch to a different road, go all the way back down, and you'll be leveling the horsemanship skill. Next, we have the hunting skill, which is a great way to gather coin, and also hunting will level your bow skill if you're using a bow and arrow. I highly recommend leveling the hunting skill in this specific location here. There is a main quest where you have a competing hunt with Hans Capon. I'm really probably not pronouncing that name correctly, but you have a hunt against him in which you compete with him. And over here in this general vicinity where the cursor is now, there's a camp in which you meet him, and then all around that camp, it appears that there is an infinite spawn of rabbits, as well as a deer spawn across the road, another deer spawn up and to the left of it. There's a lot of other animals, but there's also an infinite supply of rabbits. So you can level your hunting skill and your bow and archery skill, as well as gather a large amount of coin simultaneously if you come to this location right here. You can also train your hunting skill the exact same way that you train the bow skill at the exact same NPC. So Huntsman Berthold, however you say his name, you can talk to him and you can get some hunting experience in addition to bow experience. Next is lockpicking, but this skill is actually currently being overhauled and changed by the developers. It's very hard to do on console. It might be easier on PC, but it's extremely difficult with a controller. And it's very hard to train. There's no one specific area where you can repeatedly lockpick the same thing. There is some training from a vendor. I'll talk about that in just a second. But one good room that I found, again, it's not that great because there's only 4 chests, but is the Armory in Tallenberg. There are 2 hard chests up top, and then down below, 2 ladders down, there's 2 more chests. but those are one-offs, and once you've done them, you can't really, do them again, and you're not going to get that much experience. So lockpicking is currently undergoing a change, so it's not necessarily the best method to level it this way, but just find and lockpick various doors and chests. Look for easy ones and try and do them when no one is around, but lockpicking is getting an overhaul, so this one's kind of a moot point. There's not really that much information that I can give. You can also train lockpicking at any one of the millers, but like every other trainer or person that sells services of that kind, it does cost some coin, and you can only do it one time for each degree, each level. You can do beginner, slightly advanced, advanced, and master. You can only do that one time, costs some money, but that's another way to gain some alternative XP. There's a miller here at the Rattay Mill. There's another miller over here across the dam, which isn't really indicated on the map, and there might be more, but those are the two that I know of that are the most convenient to access. Next, we have the maintenance skill, which has some really nice perks attached to it, and the first way that you're going to be training this is to go to a grindstone at a blacksmith, and there you can sharpen weapons. You can also sharpen off the blood from weapons, which is what I've talked about in a previous video, but you'll have a little mini game here, go back and forth, sharpen the weapon, and that will increase your maintenance skill. However, there are other ways. You can get repair kits for blacksmith's items. You can also get armor repair kits at varying points in the game or from looting. And if you use these on weapons, you will then also gain some maintenance experience. It won't be a whole lot. It's not a super efficient skill to train. But, as you level up and as you're able to use these more often, you can gain maintenance experience that way. You can also come to the armor smith in Rattay and in some other areas as well. Talk to the armor smith and he will give you, in the same way that other training vendors do, a one-off experience gain at varying levels for the maintenance or repair skill. If you go to training, repairs, he will then offer you that experience. One time, does cost some coin, but gives you an alternative form of acquiring XP, especially if you're really close to a level and want that final boost. Next is pickpocketing, which is kind of a pain to train, but it does have a very, very in-depth skill tree and a lot of perks associated. So pickpocketing on this character is very low for me, but it can be a really valuable skill to use and to train up. The best way to train it, though, since it will have a decidedly negative impact on your reputation, is to only go after isolated people. They will probably know that you are there, and it's very hard to sneak up on them, but if you wait a period of time, it will get darker, and you want to be pickpocketing beggars, drunk people, and people that are asleep, because you really don't want them to be running to a guard at the first sign of trouble. Sometimes guards won't take beggars seriously. Wayfarers that are isolated out here are another good option. You just have to get it so that they're not aware of your presence. You need to equip very light armor. You don't want to have plate armor on or something like that like I do, because your noise will go up, your conspicuousness will go up, and it won't be very easy to then pickpocket them. It's a hard skill to train, especially on people if they run off and grab guards. It can be very detrimental to your reputation, but it has a lot of really cool upgrades. So pickpocketing is something I would advise training, but it's a little bit more difficult. Find isolated targets, again, beggars, drunk people, sleeping people, and then pickpocket them over and over. Another valid thing that you can do is use a savior schnapps right before you pickpocket a high value target. That way, if you do fail, you're not going to negatively impact your reputation, because you can reload immediately after that. And then after you've reloaded, you can try again over and over on that one save until you've then successfully pickpocketed. You can also train pickpocketing by talking to Miller Peshek. You can actually have him kind of stand there as a dummy for you. I'd like to try pickpocketing again, but it doesn't give very much experience at all. It's a very slow way to train, though it doesn't have that added risk of losing reputation. And then, like with every other skill vendor or skill trainer, you do have a one-off pickpocketing experience gain from him that you can purchase for a little bit of coin. It's kind of one of the more useful things in the game, honestly, and the more useful ways to train a skill, in particular with pickpocketing, because it is so harmful to your reputation. So I am always going to be using this whenever I get to a threshold and level up pickpocketing to a point where I can buy some more experience. So Miller Peshek, you can practice on him, practice on beggars and drunk people and sleeping people, and then you can also buy a little bit of XP here and there. Next, we have the reading skill, and as we discussed previously in the video when talking about alchemy, there is a specific quest that you need to do in order to unlock this. So for reading, you need to do the quest Mightier Than the Sword, which can be found in Uzits. Again, I'm butchering the pronunciation, I know that, but it can be found at the scribe all the way up here in the top right-hand corner of the map. You go to him, you talk to him, you do some stuff, you learn how to read, and then you should buy books from every vendor that you talk to in the game. If any vendor has a book at all, buy that book and then read and study that book once you've unlocked the reading skill. That's how you're going to raise it the fastest. The scribe that gives you the quest also has a large supply of books that you can purchase to get you started if you're struggling to find any. There's a whole bunch of things here that can raise your reading experience. He's the same scribe that gives you the initial quest in order to learn how to read, and he can be super valuable to the process. You do also need to be well rested, well nourished, and sitting down in order to practice reading and to study books. So keep that in mind. Find a bench, make sure that you've eaten a meal, and then go to your inventory and start to research some books. You'll study them for a period of time, and then you'll gain the reading experience. Last up, we have the stealth skill, and this is one that's easier to train and super valuable, but very hurtful to reputation if you do it improperly. The best method that I have found to level stealth is to sneak up behind any isolated person and knock them out. You will gain levels very quickly, and side note, you can also take all of their gear and then sell all of that gear, and it won't negatively impact your reputation. You're not killing anyone. You can loot them while they're unconscious, you can grab all this stuff, and you can gather coin quite quickly. However, if you do get seen, then it will have a very big impact on your reputation. You will get fined. The guards will chase you down. You will have to go to prison. It really won't be a pretty thing. So you need to make sure that the person is isolated. You need to make sure that you sneak up behind them and knock them out. But it is a really quick way to train stealth. You can do this anywhere you want to. There's no specific location that I would say is better or worse for doing it. Just make sure that you're not seen and that the person is alone. At nighttime, people are asleep in their homes. You can kind of sneak in there and do it. You know, you can try pickpocketing, and if it doesn't work, you can knock them out. There's a lot of different places that you can go to do this, and a lot of different people that you can, you know, train your stealth on. But it's a pretty easy one to train, and it's very valuable. That's pretty much going to wrap it up, guys, for this video on how to best level all of your skills. I highly recommend, you know, going through and spending an hour on each skill in order to raise it to a decent number, because when you've unlocked all the different options in the game, it becomes a vastly more pleasant experience. I mean, very little things can have a huge impact. For instance, in the main level category, getting the first aid skills, if you look at the information on that, you'll unlock dialogue options just from having the first aid skill, and you'll have like these medical answers to questions. That's just one example, and there are many more. So when you've gone through and you've leveled all the different skills and you've seen all the different perks, you can unlock kind of Assassin's Creed-esque, you know, kill style perks for when you're, you know, approaching something with a stealthy manner. There's a lot of different things that you can do. So I'll stop rambling here. Hopefully this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments down below. And if you have a more efficient method of training any one of these skills, also leave it down in the comments, because I'll pin that to the top, or I'll favorite it, or somehow I'll make sure that it comes to the top of the comment feed and people can then see that, because that's also valuable feedback. A lot of the times with this game in particular, now I'm noticing on my recent videos, people have very valuable feedback for it, and alternative methods of progression or different, you know, tips and tricks. So I will make sure that that goes to the top of the feed. If you have a different method that is, you know, better or just as good or just more fun, then let me know in the comments. You don't need to put some kind of thing about how you're wrong, I've got a better method. Like, I welcome that. Put it in a comment. I'll put it at the top, and other people can get, you know, can benefit from that as well. So thank you for watching. Check out the links down below if you want to support the channel. Check out the Patreon in particular, if you are down to, you know, help us support the projects that we're trying to do and help support community development at Upper Echelon. And otherwise, check out the website, the forums, the Facebook group. There's a lot of like-minded gamers there and a great community. And as always, have a nice night.